Good afternoon, students of Chinese YMCA Secondary School. We are now going to play you the news clip from yesterday.
Police are looking into possible drug taking at a music festival over the weekend that ended up with one person dead and 3 critically ill. Doctors say test results on 3 of the 4 people who collapsed at the event showed traces of illegal drugs. 3 people are critically ill after apparently taking illegal drugs at the Road to Ultra festival on Saturday. They're all in their 20s. A 4th victim, a 27-year-old man surnamed Chow, was pronounced dead about an hour after being taken to Queen Elizabeth Hospital. The 4 did not know each other and did not have a history of drug use. The 3 who survived are in intensive care, and doctors say suspected illegal drugs were found in their system. The most seriously ill of the 3 is a 21-year-old woman who has a heart problem and was the first to collapse. It's the 2nd year the annual festival was hosted by Hong Kong at the West Kowloon Cultural District.
Every event is assessed. Every event has to do a proper risk assessment. And this, bear in mind, is not the first time that this organisation has organised an event on our site. We had no problems at all last year.
He also stressed that the authority would be working closely with the police and the organiser to find out what happened and to all learn lessons from the tragedy.
We intend to review our procedures to make sure that when we do have an external hire event such as this, that we are confident at all times that the terms and conditions are observed properly. Make sure that every external hirer knows the terms and conditions, knows our expectations. For example, absolute zero tolerance for illegal activities. That needs to be reinforced.
The festival was held at Nursery Park in the district, and only those aged 18 and above were allowed in. Organisers had around 100 security guards at the event to control the crowds and carry out bag checks. It said free water refills were provided and 3 first aid booths were on site.
Meanwhile, Chief Executive Carrie Lam is named Henry Tang to take over from Matthew Cheung as chairman of the West Kowloon Cultural District. Lam says the former senior official is the right man for the job.
And I cannot think of a better candidate than Mr. Henry Tang to take over the helm again to lead the West Kowloon Cultural District project. So today I'm very honored and very happy to announce that I have appointed Mr. Henry Tang to be the chairman of the West Kowloon Cultural District Authority Board from the 1st of October this year.
In other local news, pan-democratic lawmakers have condemned a pro-establishment legislator's comments on independence seekers. During a rally held yesterday against independence and Occupy movement co-founder Benny Tai, lawmaker Junius Ho called for the killing of those who attempt to separate Hong Kong from the mainland. Pan-Democrats have asked the police to take action against Ho. Secretary for Justice Rimsky-Yun says whether Ho's remarks were criminal depends on the overall meaning and background of his comments. Meanwhile, Arthur Lee, chairman of HKU's Governing Council, says the university has no grounds to fire Tai, who is a faculty member.
As far as I know, and I've checked that with the Vice-Chancellor, who have checked it with the Dean of Law, that Mr. Tai had at no time asked a student to participate in Occupy Central during his lectures. Right? So therefore, you can't say that he has done something that is against the university rules and regulation.
In Macau, the turnout rate was about 57% for yesterday's Legislative Assembly election. As Caleb Leung reports, the pro-democracy camp had a good night.
The Democratic camp managed to win 4 directly elected seats in this election. Pereira Coutinho, a candidate with a civil service background, returns to the assembly with more than 14,000 votes. Both Kwok Chung and Au Kam San managed to garner more than 10,000 votes. They are both veteran lawmakers from the Democratic camp, but were running on 2 separate candidate lists this year. Says it's hard to win votes without attacking his own friends, but he tried and managed to survive. Su Kao-ho became the youngest lawmaker in Macau history after winning more than 9,200 votes. So was the top candidate for the new Macau Association, a major pro-democratic political party in the enclave. Another newcomer in the assembly is journalism scholar Lam Yuk-fong. This is her third try to become a lawmaker, and she hopes to bring more rational voice to the legislature. Lam is a member of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, who claims she is neither pro-establishment nor pro-democracy. Ilo Yu, a political scholar from the University of Macau, says Lam represented voters who were fed up with how the pro-establishment camp were holding the government accountable. The pro-establishment camp managed to grab 9 of the 14 directly elected seats. Mak Soi-kun was the top vote-getter after winning more than 17,000 votes. Casino mogul Angela Leung will also return to the legislature despite winning less votes than in the previous election. All 12 seats returned by indirect elections also went to the pro-establishment camp. Macau's chief executive Fernando Choi will appoint another 7 lawmakers to form the 33-seat assembly. Caleb Leung, TVB News.
Overseas now, the Trump administration is thinking about closing down the U.S. Embassy in Havana following unexplained incidents that have affected the health of American diplomats. Such a diplomatic response could jeopardize the historic restart of relations between the U.S. and Cuba. 5 Republican senators are calling for Washington to expel Cuban diplomats in addition to closing the U.S. Embassy.
Should that happen?
We have it under evaluation. It's a very serious issue with respect to the harm that certain individuals have suffered. We've brought some of those people home. It's under review.
Cuban President Raul Castro has denied any responsibility. He told the top American envoy in the country that he is equally baffled and has even offered to let the FBI come down to Havana to investigate. Some of the 21 medically confirmed U.S. individuals affected have permanent hearing loss, concussions, and ear ringing.
China's foreign minister was in Panama for the opening of the new Chinese embassy in the Central American country. It comes only months after Panama switched diplomatic recognition from Taipei to Beijing. Tony Sabine reports.
An historic moment as the unveiling ceremony was held to mark the opening of the Chinese embassy in Panama. Foreign Minister Wang Yi was in Panama City during the weekend for the celebrations that mark a new chapter in bilateral relations. He was welcomed by Panamanian President Juan Carlos Varela, as well as the country's Vice President and Foreign Minister. The historic meeting marks the first visit of China's Foreign Minister since the establishment of diplomatic relations between the two countries in June. At the time, Panama cited economic and strategic reasons for its decision to recognize the PRC in Beijing over the ROC in Taipei. Panama's decision to break off ties with Taiwan was a huge coup for China, which already had long-standing commercial and trade links with the strategic nation stretching back many years. It was also a big blow for Taiwan, which has seen the number of countries that recognize it dwindle to a handful of nations in the Americas and the South Pacific. Aside from the embassy opening, Panama also announced that Beijing was looking to finance major infrastructure projects in the country worth hundreds of millions of US dollars. These include a new deep-water port and the construction of a passenger and freight train route to the Costa Rican border. Tony Sabine, TVB News.
Hundreds of police officers in riot gear mobilized in downtown St. Louis after a third day of protests over the acquittal of a white ex-police officer in the death of a black man. Police say they've made about 80 arrests amid reports of property damage and vandalism in the streets. The protest began at the police headquarters downtown. Hundreds of people marched through the downtown streets as well as 2 shopping malls in the more upscale areas of St. Louis. The demonstrations had started out peacefully, and by nightfall most had gone home. But the 100 or so who remained grew increasingly agitated. They began knocking over planters and smashing windows. Police say a few demonstrators then sprayed bottles with an unknown substance on officers. One officer suffered a minor injury. Soon afterward, additional officers in riot gear were deployed and police scoured the downtown area deep into the night. Dozens were arrested after police said they ignored orders to disperse. Protest organizers say they are frustrated that a few troublemakers are making it harder to spread their non-violent message. Many protesters believe police provoked demonstrators by showing up in riot gear and armored vehicles. Police say they had no choice but to protect themselves once protesters started throwing things at them. The demonstrations began Friday after a judge ruled that Jason Stockley, who left the department and moved to Houston 3 years ago, was not guilty in the 2011 death of 24-year-old Anthony Lamar Smith. Stockley and his partner were trying to arrest Smith for a suspected drug deal when Smith sped away in his car. Stockley testified he saw Smith holding a revolver, but prosecutors said DNA evidence showed Stockley planted the gun in Smith's car after shooting him 5 times. The judge said prosecutors didn't prove murder beyond a reasonable doubt. Another round of protests is planned for Monday evening.